denizens of the night. Welcome to another episode of the macabre, the terrifying. Broadcasting live from a darkened study where evil waits, I will be your guide through the witching hours. Tonight, we'll hear two stories from Zeeshan Ali. The first one follows a house cleaner who finds a little something extra at one of his jobs. And the second follows a woman mourning a loved one who begins to notice strange things happening around her house. These stories are called I Found a Priest's Diary from 1910 and I Think There's Something Wrong with My Reflection, both of which were written by Zeeshan Ali. I've been working for a cleaning company for a couple of years now, and you see some weird stuff, but nothing compares to what happened at the old Fisher house. The memory of that day still crawls under my skin, and sometimes I wonder if I'll ever shake the feeling that something is watching me, something dark. It started like any other job. Mrs. Fisher had passed away a few weeks ago, and her family wanted the place cleaned up so they could sell it. The house was big, a dusty old thing in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by thick woods that seemed to swallow up the sunlight. It was one of those places that immediately felt wrong the moment you stepped inside. The air was stale, thick with the smell of rot and neglect. Every step I took on the creaky wooden floors echoed through the empty rooms, the only other sound being the wind outside rattling the broken windows. I started in the living room, wiping down furniture and sweeping the floor, trying to ignore the uneasy feeling that had settled in my gut. It was in one of the upstairs bedrooms where I found it, a small leather-bound diary tucked under a loose floorboard. The diary looked ancient, the pages yellowed and brittle, the leather cracked from age. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe it was just some old family keepsake. But when I opened it, something changed in the air around me. The first page was written in shaky, old-fashioned handwriting, dated July 12, 1910. It was signed by a priest named Father Augustine. His words were strange, like he was documenting something terrible that had happened. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. I write this to recount the horrors that befell the village of St. Cuthbert, for my soul will never rest until the truth is known. I kept reading, feeling a shiver crawl up my spine. It began with the children, their laughter twisted into screams, and their eyes turned black as night. One by one they fell to the curse, speaking in tongues, writhing like serpents upon the ground. At first, we thought it was a sickness, but it was not of this world. It was the work of the devil himself. The room suddenly felt colder, and I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see someone standing behind me. But the house was empty. I was alone. I swallowed the lump in my throat and forced myself to keep reading. I was called to the village when the first child died. Her body twisted in unnatural ways, her mouth open in a silent scream. The villagers whispered of demons, of something unholy that had come to our land. I did not believe them. I was a man of God. I was a fool. The first exorcism failed. Deus in adiutorium meum intende. The words of the ritual did nothing. The child laughed, a laugh that was not her own. She spoke to me in the voice of 1,000 serpents, mocking God, mocking my faith. And then she died, her body turning cold and stiff in my arms. I slammed the book shut, my heart racing. Something was wrong. I could feel it in the pit of my stomach, a creeping sense of dread that was getting harder to ignore. But I couldn't stop myself. I had to know more. I opened the diary again, flipping through the pages. The priest's handwriting grew more frantic as the entries went on, his Latin prayers scattered throughout the text, as if he were desperately trying to cling to his faith. I have seen the face of evil. It wears the skin of the innocent, but its soul is black. The demon is no longer in one body. It moves through the village like a plague, corrupting, consuming. I tried to perform another exorcism tonight. It went wrong, so very wrong. Daimones me circumdederunt. The demon was stronger than I could have imagined. It spoke my name. It knew me. It taunted me, saying it had been waiting for me. I could feel its presence in the room, crawling beneath my skin, filling the air with its stench. Suddenly, I heard a soft creak behind me. I jumped, the diary slipping from my hands and falling to the floor. I whipped around, my heart in my throat, but the room was still empty. The shadows seemed to shift, though, moving in ways that didn't feel right. It was like something was here with me. I picked up the diary again, my hands shaking. I wanted to stop reading, but something was pulling me in, like the words had a power of their own. I flipped to the last entry, dated October 31st, 1910. The village is lost. The demon has claimed them all. Men, women, children. It moves through them like a plague, leaving only death and madness in its wake. I hear its voice in my sleep now. It whispers to me, calls to me. I know what I must do. This is no longer a battle of faith. This is survival. I will confront it tonight. Fiat voluntas tua. If these are my last words, let it be known that I fought, though I fear I fight in vain. The last line was written in shaky, barely legible script. I hear it now. It is coming for me. As soon as I finished reading, the wind outside picked up, howling against the windows. The house groaned, the floorboards creaking as if something heavy was moving through the halls. My breath came in short, panicked bursts, and every instinct told me to run, but my legs wouldn't move. Then the whispers started. They were soft at first, like the wind slipping through cracks in the walls, but they grew louder, more insistent. Words I couldn't understand, spoken in a language that made my skin crawl. The same language that Father Augustine had written in. Daimones ad te veniunt. The room seemed to darken, the shadows stretching across the walls, twisting and writhing like something alive. My heart pounded in my chest, and I backed toward the door, clutching the diary like it was my only lifeline. But then I saw it. In the corner of the room, barely visible in the dim light, a figure stood. It was tall, its skin pale and stretched tight over its bones, its eyes black and empty. It didn't move, but I could feel its gaze on me, cold and malevolent. My breath caught in my throat, and for a moment I was frozen in place, unable to look away from the thing in the corner. Then it smiled. The smile stretched impossibly wide, splitting its face in half, revealing rows of sharp, blackened teeth. And then it spoke, its voice a low, guttural rasp that seemed to echo inside my head. Fiat voluntas tua. I bolted. I ran faster than I've ever run before, down the stairs, through the darkened halls, out the front door. I didn't stop until I was in my car, slamming the door behind me and fumbling for the keys. The house loomed in the rearview mirror as I sped away, its dark windows staring after me like eyes. I never went back to the Fisher house. I quit my job the next day, moved to a new town, tried to forget everything I'd read in that diary. But I can't shake the feeling that something followed me. The whispers still come at night, creeping into the edges of my dreams, filling my mind with dark, ancient words I don't understand. And right now, as I'm writing this, I feel like I'm being watched, like there's something standing in the corner of the room, smiling. I hear it now. It is coming for me. I think there's something wrong with my reflection. I don't have anyone else to talk to about this. I don't have any friends, family, or even acquaintances. When I ran away with Dan, I thought I was moving towards a better part of my life. I was going to be more grand, more promiscuous, and more exotic. But I can't. I arrived at the house just after dusk. It was smaller than I remembered, hunched beneath a sky the color of ash. The realtor had called it quaint, but now all I saw was decay. The paint, once white, peeled like dead skin, curling back from the wood in long, brittle strips. The windows were clouded with dirt, like they hadn't been touched in years. I wanted peace, solitude. But as I stood there, staring at the house, I felt the air grow heavy, pressing in on me. Grief does strange things to your mind, I thought. I hadn't been myself since Dan's accident. His death left a gaping hole inside me, and this place, this forsaken house, was supposed to be a refuge, a place to escape, to grieve in silence. But the longer I looked at it, the more I felt something was wrong. I shook off the feeling, telling myself it was just the exhaustion. I dragged my suitcase inside and shut the door, the echo of the slam too loud in the empty rooms. The house smelled like damp wood and old memories, stale and suffocating. I unpacked slowly, my hands numb, mind drifting. That first night I slept fitfully, wrapped in Dan's old sweatshirt. The wind outside howled like a wild animal, scratching at the windows. I thought I heard footsteps in the hallway around midnight, slow, deliberate, but when I forced myself out of bed to check, there was nothing. Just silence, thick and oppressive. By morning, I convinced myself it had been a dream. Days bled into each other. I wandered the empty rooms, the floors creaking beneath my weight, each groan sounding like the house's whispering voice. Objects started disappearing. Small things at first. A spoon, a pen, my keys. I brushed it off, telling myself I was just forgetful. Grief does that to you. I'd forget my own name if I didn't say it out loud sometimes. But the mirror, that was harder to ignore. It started with glances, catching the corner of my reflection when I wasn't looking for it. I'd be in the kitchen washing dishes, and out of the corner of my eye, I'd see something move in the hall mirror. At first, I thought it was just my reflection, delayed somehow, but it wasn't. One night, as I passed the mirror, I saw her, me, standing there, staring back. Only she wasn't copying me. I froze, my heart thudding painfully in my chest. My reflection stood still, her face slack, eyes wide and dull. She was waiting, watching. I reached a trembling hand toward the glass, but before I could touch it, she moved. Not a blink, not a shift in weight, just a sudden, violent jerk. Her hand shot up to the glass, slamming against it with a sickening thud. I screamed and stumbled back, but when I looked again, my reflection was normal, a terrified, pale version of myself. I backed away, avoiding the mirror for the rest of the night, every muscle in my body wound tight, waiting for something to happen. But nothing did. Not yet. The next day, I started hearing the voice. It whispered, faint at first, almost like a breeze, but then it grew louder, clearer. It was Dan. I was sure of it. His voice, soft and familiar, coming from the walls, the floors, the cracks in the wood. He was calling to me, telling me he wasn't gone, that he was trapped here, with me. I wanted to believe it. God, I wanted it so badly. The grief in me ached, tearing at the seams. I spent hours sitting in the dark, listening for him, begging for more. But all I got were whispers, taunting, cruel. The voice turned from gentle to accusing, blaming me for his death, telling me I had abandoned him. "You let me die," he hissed through the walls. "You should be with me. Come back to me." I tried to shut it out, but it followed me from room to room. The objects that had disappeared started showing up in strange places. On the bed, in the fridge, inside my shoes. Things I didn't even own appeared in the house. An old pocket watch, a child's stuffed bear, a photograph of someone I didn't know, their eyes scratched out. The mirror was the worst. Every time I passed it, she was there, my reflection, but she wasn't me anymore. Her eyes followed me, tracking my movements. She smiled when I wasn't looking, a cold, mocking grin that stretched too wide. I tried covering the mirror with a sheet, but every time I left the room, the sheet would be on the floor when I returned, the glass gleaming as if nothing had been there at all. By now, I was hardly sleeping. The voice never stopped. My reflection never looked away. Then, last night, it happened. I woke to the sound of glass shattering. Heart racing, I sat up in bed, blinking in the dark. The mirror. I knew it before I even stepped into the hallway. I could feel it, like a heartbeat pulsing in the walls. The mirror was broken, shards scattered across the floor. But in the middle of the glass stood a figure, tall and dark, shifting like a shadow made of flesh. It smiled at me, my reflection, no longer behind the glass, but standing in my home, dripping with something dark and sticky. I tried to scream, but the sound lodged in my throat as she moved closer, her smile splitting her face in two, wide and grotesque. "Come with me," she whispered, her voice like shattered glass. "Come be with him." I ran, but the house twisted around me, the walls groaning as they stretched and warped. I could hear her behind me, her footsteps quick and sharp like the ticking of a clock. Closer, closer. Now I'm here, hiding in the attic, my back pressed against the cold wood. The whispers are louder, Dan's voice mingling with hers, calling me, telling me to give in, to join them. I don't know how much longer I can hold on. The door is creaking open, and the mirror is gone. I think she is too.
These two stories have brought some wonderful October memories flooding back to me. Have you ever read Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark? It's a 3-book series of short horror stories for kids, written by Alvin Schwartz, with some fantastically creepy imagery from the illustrator Stephen Gammell. It, and the Goosebumps series of books, served as an introduction to horror for many children growing up in the mid-'80s and '90s. Among the horrific tales in those books, there are a few that were written to be read out loud, by flashlight and in the dark, of course, to your friends. Looking back on it, I suppose that was my first ever experience of thrilling an audience by reading out loud to them. There were cues in the text for when you were supposed to slow down and build tension. And of course, several of them even had jump scares written in, where you were supposed to lower your volume and get your friends to really lean in, and then boom! You exploded forth with a loud scream, and everyone got a good thrill and a laugh. To bring it back around to tonight's tale, I got the sense that both of these stories could have a jump scare like that at the end. Our house cleaner, haunted by demons. The last line, "I hear it now. It is coming for me." You wait a couple beats, and then bang! Your friend has to go home early because you scared the pee out of them. Same thing in our story of the grieving woman. The mirror is gone. I think she is too. Look around at each anxious face, fixed in place by your yarn, and then, turns out she's right behind you. If you enjoyed these stories, please check out the author in the links below. These two stories are among a handful of others that the author is compiling into a short story collection, so keep an eye on their Reddit page for future updates. Please also leave a like on this video and subscribe to hear more jump scares and spooky stories, old and new. Whatever you do, stay away from mirrors when you're cleaning a demon-infested house in the woods. And don't fall asleep. Boo! Sorry, couldn't resist just one more.